I spent 5 years in prison for a crime my wife committed. The morning they let me out, she was already at the government office. She had the papers, she had an envelope, she had the man she wanted to marry next standing at her shoulder with his hand flat against her back. $20,000, that was the number she picked for 5 years. I signed. I took the envelope. I said thank you. She asked me one question that morning. She was still asking it 10 months later. So were a lot of other people, and none of them got a word out of me. I gave the answer away once at the very end, and by then it was worth nothing to her. The gate went up at 7 and there was nobody on the other side of it. I had expected that. I had the jacket they issued me and what was under it and nothing in my hands. There was a bus. The bus cost money, so I walked and it took 2 hours and they were good hours. Nobody told me where to stand. Behind me was a room I had slept in for 5 years and an old man's hands and a roll of dark silk laid open across a set of knees. I never once saw his face. I stopped asking why in the second year. Meilin was in the chair by the window because she had chosen the chair by the window. She always did that. She never sat anywhere she had not picked. 5 years and she had not changed at all, which surprised me more than if she had. The same white coat, the same hair, not one piece of it loose, and I remember thinking that it must take a long time in the morning to look like you had not thought about it. The man beside her was new. He had sunglasses on indoors. He had a watch that was too big for his wrist and a suit with a shine to it that wool does not have. His hand was on her back the way you hold a door open for a photographer. He looked me over once and decided he was finished. "That's him," he said. "That's him," Meilin said. She did not say hello, she did not stand. She slid a brown envelope across the table with 2 fingers and left them resting on it. 20,000, she said. "Sign and it's yours." Jian laughed, not at me, at the number. He thought it was funny that it was so much. 20,000, the clerk said. There was a woman at the next table waiting with her own papers and she had stopped doing whatever she was doing and the two of them looked at each other and then at the floor. Meilin did not look at them. 5 years is 5 years, she said. "I'm being generous, nobody else would give you anything." I asked about Lingling. It was the only thing I had come to ask. "She's 6, I said. "Where is she?" "With your parents where she's been for 5 years. Meilin turned a page and did not look up. "You can keep her," I waited. "Take her, she's a burden and she's yours." She capped her pen and set it down square with the edge of the table. "I'm not spending the next 12 years on a child who already smells like your mother's apartment." Jian said something then. I am not going to repeat it. Meilin let him say it and she let it sit there and she did not tell him to stop, and that is the part I want you to hold on to. I picked up the pen. I did not look at the papers. There was nothing in them for me. I signed my name and I put the envelope in the inside pocket of the jacket and I said thank you. That was when she finally looked at me. I have thought about this since. She had something ready. You could see it in her the way you can see a man's shoulder before he throws. She had a speech. She had been carrying it around for a while and she had probably improved it and it was a good one and it was written for a man who was going to shout at her or cry or take hold of her wrist and ask her how she could do this to him. She was angrier about that than she had been about anything in 5 years. "That's it," she said, "that's it. You're not going to say anything." I said thank you. So she gave me the speech anyway with the wrong man standing in front of her. She stood up and told me what hand group had cleared last quarter. She said the number twice, once for me and once for the room. I started that company when I was 25. I named it after myself because I could not think of anything better and I was in a hurry to file the paperwork. She kept the name when she took it, because changing the sign on the front of a building costs money, and Meilin has never spent money on a thing that does not show. She had walked underneath my name every morning for 5 years. She had never once heard it. She told me what she was worth. She told me what the apartment cost and that she had been in a magazine in March and that the man beside her had taken her to 3 countries in 1 year. She told me I would be on a construction site by winter and not to come to her when I got hungry. "You will not get another dollar," she said. "Not one. If I see you on the street, I am going to walk past you." "All right," I said. "Say something," Jian said. I looked at him. He had pushed the sunglasses up onto his head by then. His shoes were good shoes and they were worn down at the back of both heels, the way shoes get when a man cannot afford to change the ones nobody looks at. I did not say anything to him. I have never regretted it. Outside it was raining and I had nothing to put over my head. I stood at the edge of the road and put my arm out. 3 cars went past with their lights on. A 4th slowed down enough to look at the jacket and then it did not slow down any more after that. Meilin came out under a black umbrella that Jian was holding for her. She stopped. She watched me do it. She enjoyed that more than she had enjoyed the divorce. I could tell because during the divorce she had been working. 5 years, she said, and you cannot get a car to stop. I put my arm out again. She had about 90 seconds left of being the most important person on that street and she spent all of it on that. Then the sound started. It came in low underneath the rain and it was wrong for that road. It was too much engine for a street with a government office on it. The woman with the papers came to the door to look. The clerk came to the window. Meilin turned around and she started to smile because she thought she knew what it was. There were 12 of them. They came around the corner one behind the other and not one of them stopped for the light and the street stopped instead. The first was long and low and the color of a gun. I did not know what it was. The boy standing next to me did. "That's a 2.4, he said to nobody. "There's one of those in the whole country." "1, 2.4 what?" The woman with the papers said. $1 million. The rest were black and identical, and they came to rest in a line that took the entire road, and the doors opened together, and men got out of all of them at once and stood in the rain with nothing over their heads. Nobody in that line looked at the weather. Meilin fixed her collar. I watched her do it. She put the umbrella into Jian's hand without looking at him. She straightened her collar and touched the back of her hair, and she arranged her face into the face she keeps for photographs, and she stepped off the curb. She had been waiting 5 years for something like this to happen to her in public. She turned her head half an inch toward Jian. "You did this," she said. It was not a question. She was already smiling at the cars. Jian did not answer. I looked at him. He had gone very still, and his mouth was doing something he had not given it permission to do. He had not done it, and he was not going to say so. She walked up to the first car and put her hand on the door. "Step away from the vehicle," the man said. She laughed. She actually laughed, and she left her hand where it was. "It's all right," she said. "I'm the one you're here for. Step away from the vehicle." He did not say it louder the second time. He said it exactly the same. That was the part she had not understood yet. Nobody in that line was ever going to raise their voice at her, because raising your voice at somebody means they matter. Then all of them moved at once. They came off the cars and up the pavement in a line, past her, past Jian, past the woman with the papers, near enough that Meilin had to take a step back to keep her shoulder. Not one of them looked at her. The first man stopped in front of me. The rain was running off his jaw. He opened the back door of the first car and stood beside it. He said, "Wyming is waiting." Phones came up in the doorway of the government office. Somebody said the price of the car again and got it wrong, and the boy corrected him, and somebody else said it a third time to a person on the other end of a call. Meilin got to me before I got to the door. She had my sleeve in her hand, the gray one. She had never touched that jacket before, and I could watch her deciding even then whether it was going to mark her coat. "How?" she said. "How do you know these people?" That was the first time. I took her hand off my arm and gave it back to her. I got in the car. I did not turn around. People have asked me what I was thinking about in that moment. The answer is that I was thinking about whether my mother had eaten. The last I saw of her was in the mirror. She had not moved. Jian was still holding the umbrella, and he was holding it over himself. Her hair was wet. In 5 years I had never once seen her hair wet. The house was an hour outside the city. It had a wall around it, and the wall had a gate in it that took 2 men to open. Wyming was in a wheelchair in a room with the curtains drawn. He was 74, and he was gray the whole way through, the gray that is not a color so much as a countdown. Somebody had put a blanket over his knees, and he had pushed it onto the floor, because he had decided a long time ago that he was not a man who has blankets put on him. I liked him inside of 4 seconds. That does not happen to me. He did not waste any of my time. He told me what the hospitals in the capital had given him, which was 6 months. He told me what the ones abroad had given him, which was 4. He told me he had been looking for me for 2 years and that he had found me the day before yesterday. Then he held up a card. He did it with both hands. A man who could have bought the street I had been standing on that morning held up a black card in both hands, the way you hand something over in a temple. $1 billion, he said. "It is on there already. If you want more than that, say the number and it will be on there tonight." Somebody in the doorway said, "1 billion? Put it away," I said. "Then name a number." "There isn't one." He looked at me for a long time. I do not think anybody had said that to him in 40 years. I do not think he knew where to put it. "Why?" he said. "Because I did not learn it for money," I said. "Sit back." I took the roll of dark silk out of my inside pocket and set it on the table beside his chair and opened it out flat. There was a woman in the doorway in a green coat. She had come in at some point and stopped there. She had not said anything. She had stood and watched a man in a prison jacket tell her grandfather to put $1 billion away, and she was still standing there when I looked up. She did not look away when I caught her at it. That was the first thing I ever knew about her. I was in that house an hour and a half. When I came out, Wyming had color in his face for the first time in 2 years, and a man in the corridor was crying about it, and I did not stay for that. I had one thing to do that day that mattered to me, and it was not that. The car took me back into the city and stopped at the end of my parents' street because it could not fit down it. I walked the last part. The door of the house was leaning against the wall of the corridor. It had been taken off at the hinges and set down there carefully by somebody who wanted me to see that it had been done carefully. My mother apologized for the mess. She had been standing in that corridor since she heard the car, and the first thing she said to me in 5 years was that she was sorry about the state of the place. My father was in the kitchen. He did not come out. He had a chair upright and he was putting it back where it goes, and it had been where it goes for 12 years, and he was making certain of it. He did not look at me once. He is not a man who can look at his son in a prison jacket and also stay standing. There was rice on the floor. Somebody had taken the rice out of the cupboard and put it on the floor, which is not searching for anything. That is something else. "When?" I said. "Tuesday," my mother said. "And the Tuesday before that?" "Twice." "He said he would be back." I asked who. She did not want to say it. Then she said it. "Meilin's friend." The door of the small room was open a hand's width, and I stood at it and did not go in. She was on top of the blanket instead of under it, the way she has apparently always been, with one arm out over the edge of the bed and her mouth open and her hair everywhere. And there was a drawing taped to the wall above her head of 4 people holding hands, and one of them was much taller than the rest and had been given a gray rectangle for a body, because gray is the color in the only photograph of me in that house. the one from the visiting room. The one my mother took on a phone and printed at a shop on the corner and never told me about. My mother came up behind me and said something and I did not hear it and she went away again. Later she told my father that I had smiled. He did not believe her. She was right and he was wrong and it did not happen again for 30 days. In the morning I did her hair. I did it badly. I have a pair of hands that can find a man's heart through his back and put it back into rhythm, and they cannot make two of anything the same size. And she sat on the stool in front of me and let me do it and did not say one word about it. And when I was finished, she got down and looked at a head with one pigtail higher than the other and told me it was good. She said it was good every morning after that as well. There's a strip of pavement outside her school where the cars stop and the parents do not get out of them. We walked. It takes half an hour on foot and she talked the whole way about a boy in her class who can whistle. At the gate, a boy pointed at a white car with his father sitting in it and asked her what her father drove. She thought about it. That is the part I want to be clear about. She did not get upset and she did not get clever. She stood there in the cold with her bag on both shoulders and gave it real thought, because somebody had asked her a question and she wanted to answer it properly. Then she said that her father could ride a bicycle and drive a car and drive one of the three-wheeled ones with the flatbed on the back. She said he could do all three. Then she asked the boy how many his father could do. The boy said one. She said that was all right. She said it kindly. She had not been trying to win. The other children had been laughing at the start of that and they were not laughing at the end of it, and I do not think a single one of them could have told you why. Then a black car came up onto the pavement. Jayan got out of it with 4 men. At a school, he brought 4 men to a primary school at 8:30 in the morning because he wanted it done where she could see it. He had the sunglasses on again. Take her in, I said. The woman at the gate looked at the 4 men and then at me and she took Lingling's hand and took her inside. Lingling went. She waved at me from the door because she thought I was being boring. Jayan said something about the cars from the day before. I did not listen to all of it. It took 9 seconds. I am not going to make it sound like anything. It was not a fight. A fight is 2 people. 4 men came at me on a pavement outside a primary school and 9 seconds later they were on the ground and one of them was going to need his shoulder put back in. I did that for him afterwards. I am not going to leave a man like that. Jayan was last. Jayan was down before he had his hands up. He was lying on his side on the wet pavement with his sunglasses somewhere else and both of his shoes pointed at me and the heels of both of them were worn down into the shape of the man wearing them. Where, he said, he had blood in his mouth and he was still trying to make a sentence out of it. Where does a bookkeeper learn that? That was the second time. I was already walking. Then I stopped and went back and crouched down beside him. I did not touch him. I want that on the record. I put my forearms on my knees and I said one thing to him quietly so that the 4 men on the ground could not hear it, and I said it in the voice I use with Lingling. I told him he could come back to that house as many times as he liked. I told him the door was off its hinges anyway. Then I told him what I was going to do the first time he came near that gate again. I told him which day of the week I would do it on. I gave him the hour. Then I went home and put the door back on. He sat in the car a while before it moved. I know what he did in there because the man whose shoulder I fixed told me later. He called somebody. He could not make the phone do what he wanted because his hands were not working. His face had gone. That is the thing about Jayan that has to be understood. There is a face he wears and it is a good one and it comes off, and what is underneath it is not handsome at all. Meilin heard about it by lunch. She did not ask whether he was hurt, not once, not at any point in that call. She asked how. She asked the man on the phone who had not been there. She asked his brother who had. She asked a woman from the school gate who had watched the whole thing from 6 feet away with a phone in her hand. Every one of them told her the same thing, which was that they had no idea, and she kept asking anyway all afternoon, as though the answer were somewhere in the building and she simply had not opened the right door yet. She had a meeting that Thursday. She had been chasing it for a year and a half and she thought it was the most important thing in her life. She was right, not in the way she meant. The meeting was Thursday at 10. Han Group was carrying debt that nobody had been told about, $41 million of it. She had been moving it from one place to another for 2 years, the way you move a thing around a room when somebody is coming over, and the Yulan deal was the one that made it stop being a problem. She had been chasing Yulan for a year and a half. She had never once met the person she was chasing. Cyan came into that room and Meilin spent the first 3 seconds deciding she had already won. I have had this described to me twice. Once by Cyan, once by the man who was taking the notes, and they agree on all of it. Cyan was in gray, no jewelry. She had a folder and she set it down and did not open it. Meilin had a watch on that costs more than a car and she had arranged her hands where the watch could be seen. Cyan asked who founded the company. She already knew. She had the file and she had gone through every page of it the night before. She asked anyway because she wanted to hear what Meilin would do with it. My ex-husband, Meilin said, on paper. On paper. He put his name on a registration form 6 years ago. That is the whole of it. She was comfortable. She had done this before. He has not been part of the business in 5 years. If you want the truth, he was in prison for those 5 years, and he came out 3 days ago with nothing in his hands, and he will be on a construction site by winter. I have been extremely patient about it. I finished with him on Monday. Cyan did not say anything. Meilin took that the way she takes everything. He is nobody, she said. He was always nobody. I built that company out of a man who could not make a decision, and I am not going to apologize for it, and I do not think you would would either. I've met him, Cyan said. The man taking the notes told me that Meilin's face did not move because it does not, but that she said the next word twice. When, she said. When? How long were you married? Cyan said. 6 years. 6 years, Cyan picked up the folder she had never opened. And you never found out. Then she stood up. Found out what? Meilin said. Cyan was already going. She said it from the door and she said it with no heat in it at all, which is the reason Meilin thought about it every day for the rest of that year. Ask him, she said. See how you do. Cyan did not ask her grandfather for anything. She told him about her morning because she tells him about her morning. That is all that happened. Wyming made one call. It ran 90 seconds and there was nothing in it. He did not raise his voice because he has not needed to raise his voice since before Meilin was born. He said that anybody who does business with Han Group does no business with Yulan. Then he went back to his tea. It started before lunch. The first call came at 11:40, a supplier of 12 years. He did not give a reason and he did not need one and he was off the phone in 20 seconds. By 2 there were 14 of them. By 4 there were 31. A bank in the capital that had been carrying $12 million of that debt sent a notification to a phone. It was 1 line long and it used the word immediate. Somebody in that building said the number out loud and somebody else told him to stop saying it. There is a board in the lobby of her building with the partners on it. They took it down that evening. Not out of cruelty. It was simply wrong now. She worked out where it had come from by 6, not that I did it. I did not do it and I want to be accurate about this because it matters later. Wyming did it and he did it without asking me and I heard about it at 8 that night from Cyan. I could have stopped it. That is the whole of what I did. That is the entire thing. She was at my parents' door at 10 at night. She had come alone. I did not ask about that. I went out to her and I shut the door behind me, and that was the only thing I did for her that day. Ling was asleep on the other side of one wall, and I was not going to have that voice in the house. There was a strand of hair loose on the left side. I had not seen that before either. She started at the top. She told me what was going to happen to her. She said the word bankrupt and then she said the word criminal because $41 million that nobody has been told about has a second name. Then she said please. I had never heard it. 6 years of marriage and 5 more of nothing and I had never once heard her say it. And she got all the way through it without any trouble at all, which told me she had practiced on the way over. How? She said. How do you know them? Tell me how and I will go. I will never ask you for another thing as long as I am alive. Just tell me how. That was the 3rd time. Find another husband, I said. She stopped. You did it once and it worked, I said. You know the shape of it now. You only have to ask nicely. She hit me. Then she said please again. Then I went back inside. A woman from the registry called her in the morning about the filing. She was polite. She was doing her job. She wanted to know whether the founder was available to sign, because on a restructure of that size they need the founder, and the founder's name was printed across the top of the form, and the woman had no idea in the world what she was asking. Han, the woman said, can you reach him? Meilin had walked underneath that name every morning for 5 years. That was the morning she heard it. They found her on the floor of her own office that afternoon. She had not fainted. There was nothing wrong with her. She was sitting on the floor with her back against the desk and her shoes off to one side, and there were 3 pieces of hair loose now instead of 1, and her lipstick had gone at the corner, and the office was empty because there was nobody left to be in it. She stayed there 4 hours. At 6 o'clock, a man let himself in and sat down on the floor across from her. He was in charcoal. He had thin glasses on and he took them off to talk to her. He was about 38 and he had the softest hands I have ever seen on a man. He apologized for the hour. He asked whether she had eaten. He told her he had been watching her company for the better part of 2 years and that what had happened to her was unjust. He was very, very polite. He was polite the whole way through. He never once stopped being polite, not at any point, not even at the end. Wyming could not pay me. He tried the card again on the 4th day and I told him to put it away again and he sat there a while and then he did the only thing left to him. He put me on a payroll, $900 a month, a car, the job on the form says driver. He was extremely pleased with himself about that. Cyan says it is the only time he has laughed since her grandmother died. People ask me what I see. I am going to say it once and then I am not going to say it again. I see the map. A body has channels in it the way a city has roads and they are all doing something all the time, and once you have looked at enough of them you stop having to think about it, the same as you stop having to think about your own street. Wyming had a road on his that had gone black. Not blocked. Blocked is a Tuesday. This had gone black the way a thing goes black when it has been dying quietly for 12 years and nobody once looked at it, and everything downstream of it had been routing around the hole for so long that the rest of him had gone crook trying to make up the difference. That is what 6 months means. That is all it has ever meant. It means the routing is going to run out. I opened the silk out flat on the table. There are 31 in it. They are not mine. An old man rolled them into that cloth in a room I am not going to describe, and he put it into my hands the week before he stopped talking, and I have not had it out of arm's reach since. The first one goes under the collarbone. It does not hurt and he did not feel it. The second one is the one that matters. After the second one it is arithmetic. I put 12 in him. It took an hour and 20. Cyan stood against the wall the entire time with her arms folded, and she did not say a word, and she did not go out. And somewhere in the middle of it, she stopped watching her grandfather and started watching my hands. On the 9th day, he asked for the stick. He had not asked anybody for anything in 2 years. He got up off that chair with a stick in his right hand, and he walked the whole length of his own floor to a window he had not looked out of since the year before last, and there were 4 people in that room, and every one of them was crying except him and me. He stood there a while. "There's a tree there," he said. He sounded annoyed about it. "When did they put a tree there?" The school was shut on a Thursday. Some pipe I had lingering in the back of the car, and I had told her not to touch anything, and she had touched all of it by the second set of lights. Cyan got in the front. She looked at the back seat. She did not say one word about the fact that there was a 6-year-old in it. She said hello. Lingling said hello. That was the whole conversation. Then at the other end I stopped the car and Cyan got out, and instead of going in she opened the back door and she crouched down on the pavement in a gray coat worth more than my parents' house, and she took Lingling's hair out and did it again. Both sides. Level. It took her about 4 seconds. She did not ask first. She did not say anything about it while she was doing it, and she did not say anything about it afterwards, and then she stood up and went inside, and the whole thing was over. Lingling let her understand what that is. Lingling let her. She does not let anybody, and she did not look at me first. I stood on the other side of the car with my hand on the roof. I did not say anything. I could not have told you what I was doing with my face. Cyan asked me that night in the car on the way back. She had waited until it was dark and until we were moving because she had worked out that those were the conditions under which I might say something. She asked it well. She did not ask what I was, she asked where I had learned it. "An old man," I said, "in prison." "Yes, what was his name?" The car went another kilometer. "That is it," she said. She was not angry. "That is the part. Meilin would have been angry and it would have cost me nothing at all. That's it." "All right," Cyan said, and she let it be. She never asked me again, not once in any of it. That was the 4th time. Then after a while she said, "The jacket though, what about it? You can buy a building." "I'm aware. You are wearing a coat with a number stitched inside the collar." "I am." "To a board meeting." "I was in the car park." "You were in the building." "We did that the rest of the way in." It is the most either of us had said in a week, and we both got something out of it that neither of us had been expecting. She never got an answer about the coat either. Nobody has. Meilin came to Yulan on a Tuesday with a proposal and no appointment and got a meeting anyway, which tells you what he is without anybody having to say it. I knew before he had crossed the room. It is not a thing I can teach. You watch a man come into a room and you watch where he puts his weight and what he does with his hands and how long he looks at the person who does not matter. Meilin looked at me for exactly as long as he looked at Cyan. That is not politeness. Politeness has a shape, and that is not the shape. I shook his hand and I let him walk out of that building. He said it on the way out, and he said it kindly. "You must be the driver," he said. He had my hand and he did not let go of it while he said the rest. That is good of them. A lot of firms would not. It is very hard to find work after a sentence, and most people will not even take the meeting. I think it says something about this family that they did. His hand was on mine the entire time he said it. The ring was under his thumb. He spent the rest of that year and a great deal of money trying to find out what I was, and he had it in his fist on a Tuesday in April, and he never once looked down. He meant it. That is the thing about Meilin. He meant every word, and he was being nothing but kind, and it was the worst thing anybody said to me in the whole of that year. Cyan did not say anything, but I was standing beside her and I heard her back teeth. I already knew who was funding what. I had known since a bank in the capital called in $12 million at 4 in the afternoon on a day it had no reason to. I let him walk out because I wanted a number. I wanted to know how much they were willing to spend. They spent a great deal. He was on the phone before his car was off the property, and he was not talking about me. He had come into that building looking for something to hold, and he had found one, and it was not in that building. 6 days later, he was at a table across from a woman with 3 pieces of hair loose, and he had something in front of him, and he turned it around and slid it across to her with 2 fingers. She reached for it. She had her hand out for it before she had even looked at what it was. 7 Stars bought the debt on a Monday, all of it, $41 million in one payment from a company with 140,000 people in 31 countries, and the paperwork took about an hour. She thought she had been saved. I want to be fair to her, which is not a thing I am often able to be. Nobody lied to her. Meilin did not lie to her once, and he did not need to. He sat across from her, and he was kind, and he was patient, and he took her through the terms, and every word of it was true, and she signed a document that made her an employee of a company she had never heard of, and she walked out of that room believing she owned something. She came back to the building on Wednesday. She had changed. Not her face. Her face does not change. There was more of everything on her. There was a stone on her hand you could see from across a car park and 3 more on the other one, and the coat had a shine to it, and the bag had the name written on the outside in letters 4 inches high. She had spent 5 years looking like money. Now she looked like somebody had given her some. Nobody said anything about it. Her mother did not say anything about it. That is how you know. Jayan came back that same week. He had been gone 12 days. Nobody had heard from him in 12 days, and then 7 Stars paid $41 million on a Monday, and he was in the passenger seat of her car on the Thursday with his hand on the back of her neck. She was delighted. She told a woman at a party that he had come back because he could not stay away from her. He came back because the money came back. You could set your watch by it. She was good at it. I am not going to pretend she was not. She did 4 deals in 6 weeks and every one of them was sharp. She took Han Group into a market it had no business in and she took a piece of it off a man twice her age who had been doing it for 30 years and he did not see it coming and she did not gloat about that one. It is the only time I have known her not to. She was on the front of something in September. She had a party. 200 people came, she was winning. That is what has to be understood about that summer. She was not pretending and she was not propped up in any way she could see. She was genuinely, verifiably winning, and she had never in her life been higher than she was that year. The party was on the 16th. I was in that room because Wyming was in that room, and Wyming was in that room because he had a stick now and had decided that meant he could go to things. She found me by the wall. She did it well. She had had a long time to think about it and she did it well and she did it loudly enough that the music stopped mattering. She asked the room whether anybody knew that Yulan let their drivers in the front. She said it pleasantly. Then she said the number out loud, my number, $900 a month. And a man near the bar said it again to the person next to him. And about 40 people made a noise I am not going to describe. Then she said something about my parents' street. She had the name of it right. She said it out loud and then she said what a car like Wyming's must have looked like parked at the end of it. That one landed. I will not dress it up. That one landed and it stayed landed. Wyming put his hand on the arm of his chair. He was going to get up. He was 74 and he had been walking since March and he was going to stand up in a room of 200 people and say something and it would have finished her and it would have cost him 4 months. I put my hand on his shoulder and left it there. He looked at me a long time, then he sat back. He has not forgiven me for that. He still brings it up. I went out through the kitchen. She caught me in the corridor. She had come at a run in those shoes, which she would not have done a month earlier. How, she said. You are going to tell me how I have earned it. Look at me. Look at what I have got. You are going to tell me how you know these people or I swear to God. I do not know what the end of that sentence was. I walked past her. I did not slow down and I did not look at her and I did not say a word. And I have been told since that it was the worst thing I did to her in the entire time. That she would rather I had hit her. That was the 5th time. Wyming was worse on the Tuesday. It was not the party and it was not the treatment. 7 stars had started on Yulan by then, quietly the way they do everything, and there were a dozen things on that old man's desk that had not been there in June and he would not leave them alone. I told him to leave them alone. He did not leave them alone. You cannot mend a man who is being taken apart faster than you can put him back together. I sat in that car park a long time. I am not going to tell you what I was thinking. I have come this entire way without telling anybody anything, and I am not going to start now. I will tell you what I did. I took my phone out and I made one call. It was the first call I had made to anybody since I came out and it rang twice before it was answered, which means somebody had been sitting near it. I said 6 words. Then I put the phone back in my pocket and I drove Cyan home and she asked me if I was all right and I said yes. Balin made his own call that week. I have had the whole of it described to me since. He was in a car. He was polite on that call as well. He told the person on the other end that Han Group was running above the model, and he said the number. And the person on the other end asked him to say it again because it had been too small to hear the first time. $41 million. 7 stars did 11 billion last year. Han Group was a rounding error. Meilin was a rounding error with a title and a car and a stone on her hand you could see from a car park. Then he said the other thing. He said she had about a quarter left in her. That is how he put it, a quarter. The way you talk about a tank, she had been given a company. She thought it was a gift. She had the paperwork framed. She put a photograph of it on the internet. It was a leash. I knew it was a leash the day it happened. And I let her put it on, and I let her wear it, because I wanted it on her when it went tight. I am not a good man. I have never once said that I was. 12 days later there was a man on a table in a hospital on the north side of the city who was, by every measure anybody in that building had gone. He was 34. He had taken something in April for his back. His wife had been on the floor of the corridor outside for 2 hours and nobody had been able to get her up off it. 7 stars made the thing he took, and my phone started ringing in my pocket. It was a woman I had never spoken to. She had my number from a man with a bad shoulder who had it from his brother, who had been on a pavement outside a primary school in March. The corridor was full by the time I got there. Meilin was in it. She had to be. 7 stars made the thing he took and 7 stars owned her, and she had come with 4 lawyers and a woman from a public relations firm, and they had been working on that man's wife for an hour and a half. They had a number, $1 million to sign today. 1 million, somebody said, further down the corridor. Nobody answered him. There was a doctor there with a title. He had it on a badge and he had it in his voice and he had it in the way he stood. He had been running that corridor for 2 hours and he had already told the wife what dead is. He was correct, that needs saying. He had done nothing wrong. He had a man in front of him with no reflexes and a flat trace and 11 hours of nothing behind it, and he had called it, and by everything he had ever been taught he was right. Then I asked him to let me in. He asked me where I studied. I told him I did not. He asked me where I trained. I told him I did not. He asked me in front of about 20 people whether I understood what a man in a jacket like mine looked like walking into a room like that one, and I told him that I did. Then he did the thing that finished him. Nobody made him do it. Nobody in that corridor asked him to. If that man opens his eyes, he said, I will put my license on this desk. You can have my title. I will hand it to you. He said his license, somebody said. He is not going to open his eyes, somebody else said. Meilin laughed. She was the only one who did. Every other person in that corridor had watched a woman be told she would be a widow before lunch and had at least had the sense to stay quiet about it. She laughed and then she said the thing about the driver again, and one of her own lawyers looked at the floor. I crouched down next to the wife. I asked her whether she wanted me to try. That is the only thing I said to her. She said yes, he was not empty. That is the first thing. Every person in that building thought he was empty and he was not empty, he was nodded, and there is an enormous difference, and only one of us in that corridor could see it. The thing he took in April had gone in and done exactly what it was built to do, which is shut a road down so a man stops feeling his back, and it had shut the road and then it had not opened it again, and everything behind that road had been backing up for 5 months. And then on a Tuesday all of it had arrived at his head at once. He was not gone. He was jammed. There was a knot in him about the size of a thumbnail with 11 hours of a man's entire body stacked up behind it. I took the silk out and opened it on the bed beside his arm. The room went quiet in a way that rooms do not go quiet. The room is the part I remember. 20 faces along that glass and not one of them was looking at the man on the table. They were all looking at my hands. Every one of them had already decided what was about to happen and every one of them was about to be wrong. You do not go at a knot. Everybody wants to go at the knot. You go at the 4 roads around it and you take the pressure off them one at a time, in an order, and then the knot has nothing holding it up and it lets go by itself. 3 in the forearm, 2 under the jaw, 1 in the foot, which is the one nobody ever believes. Then the 7th. The 7th one went in and I put my thumb on the end of it and turned it about the width of a hair. He coughed. That is all it was. A man coughed. The specialist made a sound like he had been hit. The wife got up off that floor. She had been on it 2 hours and she got up in about a second and a half and she did not go to her husband. She came to me. I would rather she had gone to her husband. Somebody said the word out loud. I am not going to write it down. It is not a word I use. It is not a word I have ever used about myself and I am not going to start now. It went around that corridor and it came back louder and it has followed me ever since and I never once asked for it. Meilin was standing 12 feet away. She heard 20 strangers say a word about her ex-husband that she has never once said about him. She was married to him for 6 years and she never said it. And she stood in a hospital corridor and listened to a woman she had never met say it about a man she sold for $20,000. Her face did not move. It does not. But she put her hand on the wall. She turned to say something to somebody and there was a man standing behind her. He had been there a while and nobody had noticed him, which should not be possible because he is enormous. Deming is 63. He is built like a door. He has a face that has fired several thousand people and slept fine afterwards, and when he comes into a room the room usually finds out about it. Nobody had noticed him. Meilin asked him. She did not know who he was. She asked him the way you ask whoever happens to be standing next to you. Do you know who that man is? She said. Deming looked at her for a long time. You would not understand what he is, he said. I do not mean that unkindly. That was the 6th time. Then Deming walked past her. He walked past all of them, past 4 lawyers and a public relations woman and a doctor who had just offered his license to a stranger. He went out through the doors into the car park and he opened the back door of a car and stood beside it. Then he bent 90 degrees at the waist in a hospital car park in front of 60 people with their phones out, and he held it there, and he waited. A man who has not opened a door for another human being in 40 years bent double beside a car and waited for a driver who makes $900 a month. He looked at my hand on the way past. He had come because of 6 words on a telephone. He bent because of what was on my hand. He has never said anything about it. Not that day, not since. He saw it and he took it in, and he rearranged the entire remainder of his life around it in about a second and a half, standing in a car park, and then he shut the door and got in the front. Balin was at the far end of that car park. He had been there the whole time. He had watched all of it. He watched a dead man cough. He watched 60 people say a word he does not believe in. He watched Deming go down to 90 degrees on wet asphalt, and for about 1 second he was not smiling. I saw it. I am the only person who saw it, and I have thought about that 1 second more than I have thought about the whole of the rest of that day. Then he made a call from that car park. The number he called was not mine. It was not Yulan's, and it was not Wyming's. It was a primary school. 7 stars lost 11% in 9 days, not because of me, because a man coughed in a hospital on the north side and 60 people had phones out in a car park afterwards, because the thing he took in April was still on shelves in 30 countries, and because a doctor with a title put his license on a desk on a Thursday and walked out of the building. He did that, by the way. He actually did it. Nobody made him. I did not ask him to, and I would not have. Balin had one problem, and it was not me. You cannot buy a man who turned down $1 billion in front of witnesses. You cannot frighten a man who did 5 years. You cannot embarrass a man who has been wearing the same coat since March. He had run all of it. He had run every one of those properly, and none of them had anything to catch on. I have exactly one. He did not go to court, and he did not go to a lawyer. He went to a woman. He put it in her hand on a Wednesday afternoon, and I want to be precise about how he did it because the precision is the whole thing. He did not tell her to do it. He asked her a question. He asked her whether she had thought about her daughter. That is all. That is the entire thing he did. He asked a woman whether she had thought about her daughter, and then he sat there and he was patient and he let her get there on her own. She got there in about 40 seconds. I want that in the middle of the page. Nobody made her. Balin asked her one question and she answered it herself and she answered it fast and she was smiling by the time she got there because she had solved something. The papers went in on Friday. She wanted custody of a 6-year-old she had signed away in a government office in March in one sentence, in front of a stranger without looking up from the table. She had not seen the child in 5 years. Her lawyer told her not to do it at the school. Her lawyer told her twice. She did it at the school. 3:30 on a Tuesday at the gate with about 40 parents in that street and a lawyer standing 10 feet behind her holding a folder. She got down on one knee on the pavement and she put her arms out. She had a voice on. I had never heard it before. I was married to that woman for 6 years and I had never once heard the voice she used on my daughter at that gate. She called her sweetheart. She said she had been looking for her. She had been looking for her. I was about 20 feet away by a wall. I did not move. I am going to be honest about what that cost, because it is the only thing in this entire account I am not certain I could do twice. There were 40 adults in that street, and every one of them was looking at me, waiting, because they had all worked out by then who I was, and one of them said my name out loud like it was a question. I did not move. She is 6. It was not mine to answer. Lingling stood there with her bag on both shoulders and looked at the woman on the ground with her arms out. She has my face. She has it exactly, and she does the thing I do, which is that she goes still and you cannot tell what is happening in there. She looked at her a long time, then she walked past her. She did not run. She was not upset. She did not say one unkind thing because she is 6 and there is nothing unkind in her yet. She walked past a woman kneeling on a pavement with her arms out, and she went to Cyan, who was standing by the car, and she put her hand up, and Cyan took it. That was all of it. She did not know. That is what has to be understood. She did not know what she had done. Nobody had asked her to choose between anybody. There was a lady on the ground that she did not know, and there was the lady who does her hair, and she went to the one who does her hair. She was thinking about a boy in her class who can whistle. Cyan did not look at her. That is the part I married her for. There was a woman on her knees on a pavement 15 feet away who had just been taken apart in front of 40 people. And Cyan did not look at her, and did not say anything, and did not enjoy 1 second of it. She crouched down and took Lingling's hair out and did it again. Both sides, level, 4 seconds. Then she put her in the car. I had gone. Cyan had gone. The children went in. That street emptied out the way streets do, and nobody looked at her on the way past because 40 people had just watched a thing they had nowhere to put. Her lawyer stood there with the folder for a while. Then he asked her whether she wanted him to call the car. She was still on her knees. She stayed on that pavement a long time. I do not know how long. Nobody does because the last person left before she did. That is the part people ask me about. That is the one everybody wants to talk about. I was not there. I have never seen it. I have no idea what her face did, and I have thought about that more than I have thought about anything else in this, and I am never going to know. Balin found me the following Thursday in a place near the water where I go to eat. He sat down opposite me without asking. He ordered. He ate. He was pleasant the whole way through. He did not talk about the girl. He did not mention her once. I think he had already filed it. He asked me where I learned it. He asked professionally. That is what was strange about it. He asked the way one man in a trade asks another man in the same trade, and there was nothing underneath it, and I do not think he wanted it for anything. I think he wanted to know. I learned it in prison, I said. He waited. That was all there was. He looked at me for a while and then he laughed once and put his glasses back on. That is true, he said, isn't it? Yes, and it is completely useless to me. Yes, that was the 7th time. It is the only one where the man asking understood the answer. Then I told him what was going to happen. I did not threaten him. There is no point threatening a man like that, and he would have been disappointed in me. I told him the order. You land first, then the 8 after it. I told him roughly when. I told him what it was going to cost his company, and I gave him the number, and I told him he had about 6 weeks to get his own people out of it. I did him that courtesy because he is very good at what he does and because he never once raised his voice at me. He wrote none of it down. He did not need to. He did the arithmetic while I was talking, and he knew it was true before I had finished. Then he thanked me for the meal and he paid for it and he left. They had spent a great deal of money trying to find out what I was. I had decided to tell them. Deming was on a phone that Sunday for 4 hours. He did not say much. He is not a man who says much. He said names. He said Yulan, then he said 8 more. Every one of them was a family. Every one of them said yes before he had finished the sentence. There was no fight. I want to be accurate about this because people want there to have been a fight and there was not one. Deming did not do anything to 7 stars. Nobody believes that. He did not attack them and he did not undercut them and he did not go to anybody with anything. He shut a door. There are 9 families in that city and 8 of them said yes on a Sunday. After that, 7 stars could not lease a floor or land an aircraft or get a permit signed or hire a lawyer worth having or book a table anywhere that anything happens. Nobody said no to them. Everybody was extremely polite. It was simply that every process took 3 months instead of 2, and every meeting moved, and every call went through to a person who could not authorize it. That is what that world does. It does not fight you. It slows down. 7 stars is worth $60 billion. It took 19 days. I was not in any of it, say that as well. I did not make one call after the one I made in the car park. I drove Cyan to work. I took Lingling to school. I did her hair badly. Balin did not fire her. He has never fired anybody. I do not believe that man has said a hard word out loud in his life. He stopped taking the call. That is all he did. On the Tuesday, he took the call. On the Wednesday, he was in a meeting. On the Thursday, he was in a meeting. On the Friday, his assistant said he would come back to her, and he did not come back to her, and that was the end of it. She called him 11 times on the Saturday. She worked it out somewhere around the 9th. I have been told she stopped in the middle of leaving a message. She was halfway through a sentence and she stopped and she sat down. Because there was nothing to work out. That is the thing. She had not been fired and she had not been betrayed and nobody had lied to her once. She had been finished with. She had been a thing that got used and then it was done and there was nothing personal in any of it, and Balin would have been perfectly pleasant to her if he had ever picked up. He was not being cruel, he was being efficient. She could have handled cruel. 7 stars withdrew from the city on a Monday, 4 paragraphs, her name was not in it. The debt was called at 11 o'clock the same morning. $41 million in one line with the word immediate in it. The same word, the same bank. Jian did not leave her. That would have required him to have been there. He had been gone about 2 weeks by then and she had not noticed because she had been on a phone. He came back on the Thursday for his things and he brought her with him. She was 24. She had a car outside. She waited in it. Jian stood in the hallway of that apartment with a bag in his hand and he did not make a scene. He did not shout and he did not tell her it was finished and he did not have anything to say to her at all. He offered her money. 20,000, he said. Take it and do not call me. That is the whole line. That is all of it. Then he went out to the car. She did not notice. I want that understood because it is the only thing in this account that I have never been able to get past. She did not notice. She could not have told you what she paid me. It was a number she picked in a car on the way to a government office, and it has not been in her head one time since, and a man stood in a hallway and handed it straight back to her and it did not touch anything. She took it. She had to. That is not a criticism. There was nothing else in the apartment by then. I found out later that the 20,000 was not his either. None of it was ever his, but she did not know that yet. Neither did the girl in the car. The apartment went on the 14th. They do it with paper now and with phones. There was a notice on the door of an apartment that cost $4 million. There was a message about a car. There was a man from a firm who came for the watch and he was apologetic about it and he had a form and she signed the form. She had a watch worth more than a car and a man with a clipboard took it off her wrist in her own hallway and gave her a receipt. Her mother stopped taking the call as well. I am not going to say anything about that. I saw her on the 19th. She was outside a bank on the north side at 10 in the morning. She had a coat on over what she had slept in. Her hair was down and it had not been done in about a week and there were 2 inches of a different color at the roots and there was nothing at all on her face. She was standing in a queue. She has never in her life stood in a queue. She saw the car. She came across 4 lanes of moving traffic in a coat over pajamas and she got to me on the pavement outside a bank at 10 in the morning with about 30 people watching. She did not ask. Asking is what she did in March in a road with her hand on my sleeve. This was something else. This was a woman with nothing left to trade, standing in a street with her hand out for a thing that was not for sale. How, she said. How, just tell me how. I am not asking you for anything else. I will never come near you again as long as I am alive. Tell me how and I will go and you will never see me. How do you know them? How? She said it 14 times, somebody counted. It is on a phone somewhere. I got in the car. I did not turn around. That was the 8th time. I have been asked whether that was the cruelest thing I did to her. It was not. The cruelest thing I did was 6 days later and I did it on purpose and I would do it again. I was getting married on the Saturday. I had already decided she could come. There is an apartment on the 22nd floor of a building on the east side with a notice taped to the door of it. An envelope went into the box downstairs on the Wednesday. Heavy paper. Somebody's hand had done the writing on the front. It sat in that box for 2 days at an address that did not belong to her anymore. Then she went back for it. She had to stand at a door she did not have a key to and ask a man she had never spoken to whether there was anything in the box for her. There was one thing. The jacket had been on for 10 months. I took it off on a Saturday morning in a room upstairs and folded it and put it on a chair and it did not mean anything, and I want to be clear that it did not mean anything. Then I sat and looked at it for a while. The other one was black. A man in the capital made it. He took 4 measurements and he did not say one word about the number stitched inside the collar of the thing I came in wearing. There were 400 people in that room. Deming stood at the door of it for 6 hours and did not sit down once, because he had decided that was his job that day and nobody had asked him to. Wyming walked his granddaughter in, no stick. 75 years old, and he walked the whole length of that floor with her arm through his, and he did not take anything from anybody, and there were people in that room who had been to his funeral in their heads 2 years earlier. He complained about the flowers. The doctor came, the one with the title who does not have it anymore because he put it on a desk and meant it. He shook my hand and he did not apologize, and I liked him for that, and I have since put him to work. Lingling had her hair done by somebody else. Both sides, level, for the first time since she was born. She was extremely pleased with herself and she told 6 people about it, including a man who owns a shipping line. Jian was at the meal. He had come with the girl. Her family name opens rooms and he had spent 4 months learning how to stand beside it, and she had been asked because her father had been asked, and Jian walked into that building on her arm without once wondering whose building it was. He did not look at me. He had been not looking at me for 2 hours. She had walked. 9 kilometers from wherever she was staying, and it had been raining since 4. She had the coat over what she had slept in, and there was nothing on her face, and her hair was down. She came into a room with 400 people in black tie in it, and she stood in the doorway and the water came off her onto the floor. Nobody stopped her. Sit with that. Deming was 6 feet away. Deming could have taken her out of that building with a look, and every person in that room knew it. I had told him 3 days earlier that if she came in. That is the cruelest thing I have ever done to anybody. I knew exactly what it was when I said it, and I said it anyway. They took Giant out during the meal, 2 of them quietly at the side of the room. They did not put anything on his wrists until they were through the doors because it was a wedding. It was not for anything he did to me. This is the piece that matters. I did not do it. I did not make a call, and I did not point anybody at him, and I did not need to. It was for something he ran for 6 years before he ever met her. An investment thing, 2,000 people. Some of them were old. It was always going to happen. It had been coming the entire time. It would have arrived if I had died in that cell. She was still standing in the doorway and she saw all of it. She watched 2 men walk him out past her and she watched his face come off the way it does, and she understood something. She did not lose to a better man. She never lost to anybody. She looked at a fake one for 6 years and she picked him. She got about halfway across the floor, then she went down, not the way she went down at the school. That was a performance and she was good at it, and she had chosen the knee. This was not that. This was a woman's legs going, in a wet coat on a wooden floor in front of 400 people. It made a sound. She started with the money. She asked for money first. Put that somewhere you can see it. It tells you what she is, and she never once stopped being it. She asked for money. Then she asked for the company. Then she asked for a job, and she said she would take anything, and she said she would take the driving. She said the word driving out loud in a room where every single person in it knew what I am worth. Then she stopped. And then she asked for the real thing. How, she said. Please. Just tell me how, that is all. I do not want the money. Tell me how and I will get up and go, and I will never say your name again as long as I am alive. That was the 9th time, so I told her. I crouched down so she did not have to look up. A person on the floor being talked down to is a thing I have seen enough of. There was an old man in that cell when I got there, and he had been in it longer than the building had been that shape, and nobody could tell me what he was in for, and I do not believe anybody knew, and he did not speak to me for 4 months. Then one day he took my wrist while I was eating and he put 2 fingers on it, and he told me what my mother had died of, which was nothing because my mother is alive. Then he told me what she was going to die of in 11 years if nobody did anything about it, and he was right, and I have done something about it, and she does not know. He taught me for 4 years and 6 months. He taught me the way you teach somebody who is not going anywhere, which is slowly and badly and in the wrong order and with an enormous amount of silence, and I did not understand what he was doing until the 3rd year. I never saw his face. That is not a thing I am doing for effect. He sat with his back to the light and I sat where I was put, and in 5 years I never saw it once and I did not ask. By the 2nd year I had worked out that asking him things was how you got nothing. He gave me the roll of silk in the last winter. He put it in my hands and said nothing at all about it. Then he took the ring off and put that in my hands as well. That is what Deming went down on a wet car park for, not for me. There are not 10 men alive who know what that is, and one of them was standing in a hospital doorway that day and he saw it, and he did the only thing a man like that can do about it. The old man did say something when he gave it to me. I am not going to repeat it. It was not about me and it is not mine to hand out. Then he died in the January and they let me out in the March. And I was in the room when it happened, and I was holding his hand, and there was nobody else. His name was Shen. I have never said it out loud before. I have his needles in my coat every day of my life. That is the whole of it. That is the answer. That is everything you have been asking me for since the morning I came out. An old man in a room nobody visited, who had nobody, and who gave the whole of it to a bookkeeper because there was no one else left to give it to. Then I told her the last part. You never asked, I said. She looked at me. 5 years, you never came, not once. You never took the call. At that table in March you asked me nothing at all, and every time you have asked me since, you have asked me the same thing. Who they are, how I know them. I stood up. Everybody else wanted to know where I learned it. Giant asked me that on a pavement with his mouth full of blood. The man from 7 Stars asked me over a meal and paid for it. You have never asked me that once, not in 10 months. It never occurred to you that there was anything to learn. I looked across that room. She asked me once, I gave her nothing, and she never asked me again. She wanted to know and she did not need to. That is why she is standing over there. Then the thing I had been carrying longer than the coat. I would have told you in the first week, I said. There were 14 visiting orders with your name on them. I signed every one of them myself. You did not use a single one. I had it ready every time. That is when it landed, not the cars, not the money, not the old man. She had not thrown away a rich man. There was no rich man in March. In March I was a bookkeeper in a bad coat with $20,000 in his pocket and nothing else in the world. She had thrown away a man who was going to become this. Quietly, for the rest of his life, and who would have handed her all of it every year without her ever once having to ask him for it. She sat back on her heels and put both hands flat on the floor. Then I took the envelope out of my inside pocket. It had been in there 10 months. It had been in the gray coat, and I had moved it into the black one that morning without thinking about it. The way you move your keys, it was soft. Paper goes soft. The corners had gone round. The flap was still shut. I had never opened it. 10 months, and I had never once opened it, and I could not have told you whether there was anything in it at all. I put it in her hand. I did not say anything. There is nothing to say. It is not a thing you say something about. Then I stood up and went back to my wife. She was looking at the flap. She was still looking at the flap when I left her. Nobody threw her out. That is the end of it, and it is the whole end of it. Nobody took her arms. Nobody put her in a car. She knelt on a floor in a wet coat in front of 400 people, and every one of them went back to their table. Somebody laughed at something at the far end of the room. Somebody asked for more of something. She got up on her own. She walked out on her own. Nobody watched her go. She had wanted a room for an hour. She got about 90 seconds of one. Ling found me at about 9. She had been up too long and she had cake on her and she wanted to be carried and she was talking about her hair and then she pointed across the room at Cyan and she called her something. She had not asked anybody. She did not check with me first. She had decided some time before that and she had only been waiting for an occasion. Cyan heard it from across the room with 400 people in it. She did not turn around. I watched her not turn around. I watched her decide to have that later in private where it belonged to her. My mother told my father afterwards that I had smiled. He believed her that time. Somebody asked me later what the whole of it had been for. It was not for her. She is in it because she has to be. She was never what it was for. I had a daughter who told a boy at a gate that her father could ride a bicycle. I went home. It took 10 months. That is all it ever was.